All right. Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this afternoon's desktop discussions. Want to remind everyone that you're free to submit questions to us at any time during the week at COVID-19 questions at medcombenefits.com. We'll let you know that your question's been received and when we plan to address it. Also, as we get started today, go ahead and mute yourself so that we cut out as much of the background noise as possible. Just in case you haven't ever joined us before, my name is Casey Hope. I am the marketing manager at MedCom Benefit Solutions, and I am joined by our senior legal counsel, Michelle Barkey, who has what I consider to be answers to most of life's questions. Michelle, welcome.
Thank you, Casey.
And we have some people that are still joining us, but we're going to go ahead and get started today with the first question. Our first question is, what does MedCom recommend for employers who may want to allow FSA changes during the pandemic? Do we tell them to document and allow the change?
Casey, this is a really tricky question. There are changes that an employer can make already according to the IRS regulations. During the plan year, they can add a carryover or a grace period, and they can change the run-out period. The question that we are getting all the time is, can employees change their election amounts mid-year, and can they increase the $500, which is the maximum carryover, or can they give the money back to the individuals if they have monies left over at the end of the plan year? All the latter have not been formally addressed yet by the IRS, but we hope the issue will be soon addressed. Any of the changes the employers make should be documented and the reason for it. There is a risk whenever we change something and there's not a regulation that approves it, albeit we believe that it's going to be a low risk this year, although we can't guarantee that either. We believe that this is going to be a year of discretionary enforcement. This is really, the FSAs is really affecting the non-calendar years plan, as they are the ones that are coming to the end and they have monies that are left over and employees that are freaking out that they're going to lose it. It's not affecting as much the calendar year plans, but it's affecting the calendar year's plans when employees are no longer able or they don't believe that they can contribute as much as they originally planned to. Yes, whenever you're making a change or allowing this change, if you're going to take the risk, document why you are making that decision. Any employer that chooses to bend the rules even slightly in any way should be prepared to demonstrate that all of its actions were taken in the best interest of the participants. They were not designed to circumvent the payment of owed taxes and were applied in a fair and non-discriminated way, and were reasonable. This will help ensure the best possibility of success, though no guarantee, in their event that there is a complaint and or the IRS challenges the employer's decision. But again, we're hoping that the IRS will address this shortly.
Thanks, Michelle. That was a good question and get us started. Our next question today is kind of a scenario we received. There's a business says we had to close temporarily and are not able to pay employees. The business, they've applied for a small business loan and intend to keep their employees and pay them, but do not know how long that process will take. They're asking about FSA contributions as well. Clearly, they cannot take the deductions because there's no paycheck. Would they just leave the FSA coverage active for now and then double deduct when they receive their small business loan and can pay employees? Or what other options do they have?
I think that is the best option for now, and we are hoping that the IRS will address the other issues later, so that might give them some further options. But yes, certainly in that situation, I think that's the best option. And again, I wish them well in getting that small business loan.
Thank you. Another question, technically, if an employee has a reduction in hours that goes below 30 hours per week, they would no longer be eligible for coverage. So it's a qualifying event. However, the carriers are all permitting exceptions during this pandemic. An employee is furloughed and the employer is still offering coverage, but now the employee can no longer afford all their benefits, so they want to drop coverage. I'm understanding that this is permitted as a qualifying event, but are they able to pick and choose which plans to keep? Or if the employee wants to use the qualifying event card, all plans need to be terminated?
Okay. This is also a very interesting question. We haven't really gone into a lot of detail about this before, but if they want to terminate the coverage, one of the other things that we have discussed many things with the desktop, we are discussing it now, are those furloughed employees, and that they are entitled to the benefits. But we also have to be cognizant of where other laws intersect and there is a reduction in hours. It might have been a long time since we talked about it, but we still do have the Affordable Care Act. And if you are an applicable large employer, the mere fact that there is a reduction of hours does not necessarily change your employment status. It doesn't necessarily mean that you have now gone from full-time to part-time. For an example, anyone who was hired as a variable hour employee, and you put them in those measurement periods, those look-back measurement periods, the status does not change for the entire stability period. So if you did a look-back measurement period in your calendar year plan, that stability period will remain in effect until the end of this year. So you have to be careful about that. And the same is true for someone who was originally hired as a full-time employee. Then they went, as you said, they went on furlough or they had a reduction of hours. They still have to be measured for at least 3 months before you can terminate those benefits. But that's under the health plan alone. It does not address any other plans. So even though we have that reduction of hours for the health plan, does not necessarily mean that you can actually terminate the health plan or that they're not entitled to those benefits. The next question was, can you allow the individual out of that plan? And I'm talking about the health plan only. The IRS did address this in 2014. They actually said that there would be times when an individual may have a reduction of hours, but he's still classified as a full-time employee, i.e. somebody who was in a look-back measurement period last year, classified as full-time, and now this year his hours have been substantially reduced. They said that that could be a permitted election change on the health plan side. They also said it could not be a change under the FSA, so that's where some of the laws change. However, they said this is a permitted election change. The individual employer would have to decide if they wanted to allow it. And there was also some conditions back then in 2014 when they addressed this, that going into 2015, but they never really changed it when the individual mandate penalty was reduced to 0. One of the things they said was employers would have to get assurances that the individual would get coverage elsewhere, typically through a spousal plan, which might not be an option now either. So they also said that the employer did not have to be a watch guard and that they did not have to ensure that they got that coverage. So that's just one of the things to know about that permitted election change. If it is a permitted election change and you allow them to do so, there would be no COBRA. And technically, they may not be able to get the insurance back when they return to work. The IRS did say, as I said, that the FSA could not be dropped. So we do have to watch out on those health plans if you are an applicable large employer. And that means if you have 50 or a full-time or full-time equivalent employees, and by now y'all know who you are. We are in completely unfamiliar territory right now. The IRS will hopefully address some of these concerns. I would tell you that they could probably go ahead and drop the vision plan if you allow them to do so, or the dental plan, understanding that the carriers may not let them back in until the next open enrollment, but that would be up to you as well. The next thing I do want to talk about is, again, I keep on saying hopefully the IRS is going to address some of these concerns. They actually did have, in 2018, they did do a revenue procedure 2018-58 where they addressed what would happen to some of these cafeteria plans in an emergency or in a national disaster, i.e. the COVID virus, and i.e. what we're going through with the FSAs. But it said this revenue procedure in itself, that 2018-58, does not by itself provide any postponement, or it doesn't, and proposed postponement they were talking about even as far as the FSAs and the loser to use it. But they said that generally the IRS will publish a separate notice once they approve it during an emergency. So they do have the authority. The IRS does have the authority to make some changes. We're hoping they would. But I hope that answers your question. You always have to be careful if you're an applicable large employer.
Thank you. Can an employer get the tax credit under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act and still get the Paycheck Protection Program loan from the SBA?
And the answer to that question is yes. Both questions are available, and they are available for two different reasons. First off, the tax credit under the Families First Coronavirus Response Act is for the limited purpose of paying tax credits or giving you tax credits if you have to pay someone because they are now taking the expanded FMLA leave, or if they get the 2-week sick pay leave because they're subject to the coronavirus and under those conditions. However, the Paycheck Prevention Loan Program from the SBA is under the CARES Act, and it's completely separate. However, the IRS has provided that those credit amounts that you get under the FFCRA, you will not be able to double dip those with the Paycheck Prevention Program. So that amount, you can't say that you're paying this employee and that you want to pay him when you're getting that money back from the Families First. So there's no double dipping, but you are entitled to get both you're entitled to get both, but just no double dipping individually.
May an eligible employer receive both the tax credit for qualified leave wages under FFCRA and a small business interruption loan under the CARES Act?
Yeah, and that's a duplicate really of the question. And again, if an eligible employee receives tax credits for the qualified leave, those questions are not eligible as payroll costs under the CARES Act, but yes, you are entitled to both.
Since testing and treatment for COVID-19 is now required, we are getting questions on updating plan docs, SBCs, etc. Can you shed some light on this process and what steps employers should take to make sure this is done and that they meet compliance requirements?
Okay. Most plan documents incorporate the information as to what is covered by the insurance carrier. The insurance carriers typically give us the certificates of coverage. They give us the summaries of insurance, what's covered and what's not. And if they change something, they often give the summary of material modification as well. The first thing I would do is go to the insurance carrier and see exactly what they have available that you can share with your employees. Put it with your plan documents. And then basically what the plan documents and the VAT plans do is typically say that they incorporate everything that the insurance carrier has given you. So the first step would always be to see if the insurance carrier has an SMM to provide, and that would be the starting point, and what documentation they have that you can put in the file, and then everything with that would be incorporated. You don't see a plan doc or a plan doc usually outline every single benefit, that this is paid at 50%, this is paid at 30%, this is where you're allowed to go, this is where you're not allowed to go, this is an in-house as opposed to, in-house space, or an in-network as opposed to an out-of-network. That's usually done by the insurance carriers, and then you incorporate in the plan document all that. So check your plan document, make sure that there's an incorporation clause, and then go to the carrier and see what they can provide you to give out to the employees and to reference, and that would be the incorporation.
Can an employee cancel their DCA due to COVID-19?
Yes, they can. Unlike the health FSA, the provisions of the IRS regulations pertaining to the DCAP program are comparatively more permissible, enabling participants to make changes in their payroll contributions amounts as the daycare services utilized may change during the plan year, unless the employer has deliberately specified otherwise, and limitations are written into the plan doc, and the employer can do that. DCAP participants are not limited to only the occurrence of traditional status changes in order to make a change. They can go ahead and make changes throughout the year, depending on the cost of the daycare.
Excellent. Thank you, Michelle. That was our last question for today. If anybody has any others, just quickly feel free to submit those and we can read them out loud. If not, I will let you know that we are still taking these questions for every session, which we will have our next desktop discussion on Tuesday morning at 10 a.m. So feel free to submit those questions to covid19questions@medcombenefits.com. Michelle, did you have anything else you needed to add today?
I do not today. Thank you.
Excellent. Well, thank you everyone so much for joining us. We know this is an incredibly difficult and confusing time, so we appreciate you taking time out of your day to spend it with us and entrust us for answers to your questions. Thank you, and we hope to see you again.
Thank you, Casey.
Thank you.